The silence after the vote was louder than any supernova. It spread across the grand convocation chamber like an invisible shockwave, swallowing every whisper, every breath, every flicker of movement. The chamber itself was older than most civilizations present, an impossible structure suspended in the hollow center of a captured neutron star, where gravity was bent into elegant architecture and the walls shimmered with living crystal that remembered every decision ever made within them. Countless rows of delegates sat beneath towering rings of floating light, each representing a different species from every corner of the known galaxy. Some possessed bodies of liquid metal, others floated inside translucent spheres of plasma, while ancient beings cloaked in biological armor remained perfectly still, their countless eyes fixed on the center of the chamber. Before them hovered a single holographic image, a fragile blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star. Terra. Earth. Humanity's home. Then came the verdict. Motion 7481 confirmed. The synthetic voice carried no emotion, yet it echoed with terrifying finality. Protective status revoked. Diplomatic privileges suspended. Mutual defense obligations terminated. Terra shall remain isolated under Galactic Resolution 9. A beam of pale white light descended from the ceiling, striking Earth's holographic image. Slowly, almost ceremonially, the glowing sphere dimmed. The brilliant oceans faded into muted gray. The bright atmosphere dissolved into darkness. One by one, every diplomatic connection linking Earth to the rest of the galaxy vanished until only a lonely blue dot remained, surrounded by an endless void. Not a single delegate applauded. No one celebrated. Because deep down, even those who had voted in favor understood what this decision truly meant. Isolation was never simply isolation. In the galaxy's oldest language, it was another word for abandonment. At the rear of the chamber, Ambassador Elias Rowan stood alone inside the small human delegation platform. He had expected resistance. Heated debate. Angry accusations. Perhaps even insults aimed at humanity's growing influence among the frontier worlds. But he had not expected complete silence. Not this cold, calculated certainty. His hands remained folded behind his back, though his knuckles had turned white beneath the sleeves of his formal uniform. He looked around the chamber, searching thousands of unfamiliar faces for even a hint of hesitation. He found none. Species that humanity had rescued from collapsing stars avoided his gaze. Governments whose economies had survived because of Earth's engineering innovations looked down at their consoles. Military alliances that had once praised human courage sat frozen, unwilling to acknowledge the lone figure still standing. The betrayal settled over him like freezing rain. Yet strangely, he did not feel anger. Only disappointment. A quiet realization whispered through his mind. They have no idea what they've just done. High above the assembly floor, hidden behind observation galleries that no modern delegate even knew existed, several ancient figures remained cloaked in darkness. They belonged to civilizations so old that history itself had forgotten their names. They had witnessed the rise and extinction of empires, watched galaxies reshape themselves, and survived wars fought before many stars were born. One of them slowly leaned forward. Another closed four weathered eyes. None spoke immediately. Finally, the eldest among them released a long, weary breath. "We warned them," the ancient observer murmured. "They believed humanity was too young to matter." Another voice answered, heavy with centuries of regret. "They mistook patience for weakness." Far below, Earth's holographic image blinked once. Then disappeared entirely from the center of the assembly. To the delegates, it was merely the conclusion of another political session. To the forgotten watchers above, it felt disturbingly familiar. Because long ago, they had witnessed another vote. Another civilization. Another unanimous decision born from fear instead of wisdom. That civilization had not vanished. It had returned. And the galaxy had spent thousands of years praying it never would again. Far beyond the crowded trade corridors of the inner galaxy, where civilization faded into silent oceans of starlight, the Orion frontier stretched across thousands of unexplored systems. Here, nebulae glowed like celestial storms frozen in time, shattered planets drifted through fields of crystalline debris, and newborn stars painted the darkness with rivers of gold and crimson. It was a place that older civilizations avoided, dismissing it as unstable, resource-poor, and not worth the risk. Humanity saw something different. They saw possibility. Wherever others found emptiness, humans built homes. Wherever others saw impossible odds, they saw the beginning of another chapter. Hovering above the pale blue world of New Carthage, the flagship Resolute drifted in absolute silence. Nearly 12 kilometers from bow to stern, the vessel looked less like a warship and more like a moving city wrapped in polished titanium and dark composite armor. Massive fusion spires glowed beneath its hull, while rotating habitation rings shimmered with artificial daylight. Tiny maintenance drones moved across its surface like fireflies, welding microscopic fractures left by years of deep space exploration. Along its spine, gravity cannons rested beneath armored shutters, and quantum reactor cores pulsed rhythmically, sending faint blue light through transparent energy conduits that resembled glowing veins inside a living creature. On the forward observation deck, Captain Elena Ward stood alone. The reinforced crystal viewport stretched from floor to ceiling, revealing an endless ocean of stars beyond. She folded her arms behind her back, her reflection faintly visible against the darkness. Countless missions had etched themselves into the lines around her eyes, but they had never stolen the determination that remained there. She watched transport convoys descend toward the colony below, leaving brilliant trails across the atmosphere before vanishing into clouds illuminated by dawn. New Carthage had been lifeless only 40 years earlier. Now forests covered continents that had once been barren rock. Oceans shimmered beneath orbital mirrors. Cities rose beside artificial rivers engineered molecule by molecule. Millions of people laughed, worked, argued, dreamed, and raised families on a world that every galactic survey had declared permanently dead. That was humanity. Not conquerors. Not inheritors. Builders. Behind Elena, the bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. Hyperspace navigation synchronized. Reactor output stable at 98%. Frontier relay online. The voices of officers blended with the steady rhythm of machinery. Engineers moved between holographic consoles, adjusting quantum field harmonics while technicians calibrated defensive systems with practiced precision. There was no panic, no unnecessary shouting. Human crews had learned long ago that survival in deep space depended less on perfection than on trust. Elena allowed herself one final look at the colony below. Every light represented someone's future. Every child playing beneath those artificial skies believed tomorrow would come. She intended to keep that promise. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The central tactical display flickered to life. Priority transmission. Galactic assembly. Her expression remained calm as the encrypted message unfolded across the holographic screen. Diplomatic recognition suspended. Trade accords terminated. Military cooperation withdrawn indefinitely. One sentence after another. Cold. Clinical. Without explanation. The bridge grew noticeably quieter. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Every officer understood what those words truly meant. Earth was no longer considered a partner. It had become an outsider. Elena slowly closed the transmission. For several long seconds, she simply listened, to the quiet vibration of the reactors, the distant footsteps of her crew, the faint hum of life support systems keeping thousands alive aboard the ship. Then she looked back toward the stars. "They think this frontier will become our prison," she said softly. A young lieutenant glanced toward her. "What if they're right, Captain?" Elena's eyes remained fixed on the endless darkness ahead, where unexplored systems waited beyond the edge of every known map. A faint smile crossed her face. "No," she answered. "They've forgotten something. We're the only species that has ever looked into the unknown. And called it home." At her command, the Resolute's engines awakened. Blue-white light flooded the stern as spacetime itself began to bend around the flagship. Without fanfare. Without fear. The great vessel turned toward the uncharted frontier. And accelerated into the darkness where humanity had always done its finest work. The consequences of the Assembly's vote did not arrive with speeches or declarations. They came in silence. One by one, the familiar signals that had connected humanity to the rest of the galaxy simply vanished. Trade beacons blinked offline across the frontier. Long-standing diplomatic channels dissolved into static. Navigation buoys stopped broadcasting safe hyperspace routes, leaving vast sectors wrapped in uncertainty. Across Earth's colonies, people stared at empty communication panels, waiting for replies that never came. The galaxy had not declared war. It had done something far more dangerous. It had looked away. Within 72 hours, the first attacks began. On the mining world of Kepri Station, orbital defense sensors detected unidentified vessels emerging from hyperspace without warning. They carried no national insignias, only blackened hulls scarred by countless battles. Pirates. Mercenary syndicates. Opportunistic raiders who had spent decades hiding from galactic patrols suddenly advanced without fear. They knew exactly what the Assembly's decision meant. No allied fleet would intervene. No emergency coalition would answer humanity's distress calls. Earth had become legal prey. Warning sirens echoed through the station. Red emergency lights washed over steel corridors as workers abandoned mining equipment and rushed toward underground shelters. Freight trains loaded with refined titanium screeched to a halt while automated cargo drones scattered in every direction. Above the colony, brilliant streaks of plasma fire carved across the darkness as orbital cannons fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. Explosions bloomed like miniature suns, illuminating terrified faces pressed against reinforced observation windows. Far away aboard the Resolute, Captain Elena Ward watched the battle unfold through a live quantum transmission. The holographic projection floated before the bridge crew in painful clarity. She saw defense satellites breaking apart into glowing fragments. She watched civilian transports struggle to escape collapsing docking rings. Every second another emergency beacon appeared across the tactical map. Then another. Then another. Soon the display was covered with crimson distress signals stretching across dozens of star systems. Colony Vega 9 requesting evacuation. Medical convoy under attack. Communications relay destroyed. Food shipments intercepted. The reports came faster than officers could acknowledge them. Each voice carried the same underlying fear. We're alone. The word settled over the bridge like a weight no one could lift. A young communications officer clenched his headset, desperately cycling through every known allied frequency. Nothing. Every channel returned silence. Governments that had once celebrated human explorers refused to answer. Species that owed their survival to Earth's rescue missions remained hidden behind political neutrality. No one wanted to challenge the Assembly's judgment. Outside the ship, the stars seemed colder than Elena remembered. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. She remembered Academy instructors' warning that isolation was the greatest weakness any civilization could suffer. Supply chains would fail. Morale would collapse. Entire colonies would surrender before the first battle even began. They had underestimated one thing. Human memory. Every generation of humanity had inherited stories of impossible survival. Ancient wars. Global disasters. Frozen expeditions. Moon landings achieved with fragile machines. Colonists crossing oceans with no guarantee of ever returning. Again and again, history had taught the same brutal lesson. When help never comes, You become your own rescue. Elena opened her eyes. The fear remained. But beneath it, something older awakened. Resolve. She turned toward the bridge crew. No one spoke. They didn't need orders to understand what was happening. Every officer straightened. Every engineer continued working. Every pilot remained at their station despite knowing exactly how hopeless the odds appeared. Across human space, soldiers dug defensive lines beneath alien skies while civilian volunteers transformed factories into round-the-clock production centers. Scientists abandoned research projects to improve planetary shields. Farmers loaded emergency transports instead of harvesting crops. Teachers escorted frightened children into underground shelters before returning to organize relief efforts. The galaxy believed humanity was beginning to fall apart. It couldn't see what was actually happening. Pressure was forging unity. Isolation was becoming strength. As the Resolute accelerated toward the nearest embattled colony, another emergency transmission pierced the silence. A frightened child's voice. Barely audible through static. Is anybody coming? The bridge fell completely still. Captain Elena Ward looked straight ahead, her jaw tightening as distant stars stretched into brilliant streams of light. Then she answered with quiet certainty. Yes. We are. As the fires of war spread across humanity's frontier, a signal unlike any ever recorded awakened beneath the frozen heart of Antarctica. It did not arrive through radio waves or quantum relays. It pulsed through the planet itself, a deep, resonant vibration that rolled beneath mountains, beneath oceans, beneath the very bedrock of Earth. Across the globe, sensitive seismic arrays registered it as an impossible harmonic. Astronomers noticed the moon shifting by fractions of a millimeter. Deep ocean observatories detected ancient machinery humming beneath tectonic plates where no machine should have existed. The signal lasted only 12 seconds. Yet somewhere beneath kilometers of ice older than civilization itself, something had heard humanity's suffering. At Polar Research Complex Epsilon, emergency floodlights illuminated tunnels carved through walls of crystal blue ice. Scientists, military engineers, and historians hurried through corridors as frost drifted from the ceilings like pale smoke. Every instrument inside the complex had come alive simultaneously. Displays flickered with symbols no computer could translate. Power grids overloaded despite drawing energy from isolated fusion reactors. The deeper the teams descended, the warmer the air became, until the biting Antarctic cold gave way to an impossible, gentle heat. Dr. Maya Chen stopped before a circular vault door unlike anything humanity had ever built. It stood nearly 80 meters high. Smooth. Seamless. Fashioned from a black metallic material that reflected neither light nor shadow. No welds. No hinges. No signs of construction. Only a single inscription stretched across its surface. Not alien. Human. Written in a language no living person recognized, yet somehow every observer instinctively understood its meaning. When humanity stands alone, the first keepers shall return, ****. Silence swallowed the chamber. No one breathed. This can't be real, one archaeologist whispered. It is, Maya answered, though even she struggled to believe her own voice. For decades, scattered myths had hinted that Earth's earliest history contained impossible gaps, millions of years erased without explanation. Fossils that appeared too advanced. Metallic fragments buried inside geological layers older than complex life itself. Ruins hidden beneath ocean trenches that no dating method could adequately explain. Every discovery had been dismissed as contamination, coincidence, or fraud. Now every forgotten mystery pointed here. A faint pulse rippled across the vault. The inscription glowed. One by one, the scientists' biometric scanners activated without command. DNA verified. Species confirmed. Civilizational threat level. Existential. A sound like distant thunder rolled through the chamber. The enormous door did not slide open. It dissolved. Its black surface separated into trillions of microscopic particles that floated silently into the air before vanishing altogether. Beyond it lay an endless corridor illuminated by soft golden light. At its center floated an object that stole the breath from every witness. A sphere. Nearly a kilometer in diameter. Suspended without visible support. Its surface shifted continuously, displaying oceans, continents, galaxies, equations, and human faces spanning every era of history, from prehistoric hunters to astronauts walking among distant stars. Then, a voice filled the chamber. Warm. Calm. Unmistakably human. Welcome back. Every screen inside the facility lit up simultaneously. Historical timelines rewrote themselves before horrified eyes. Civilizations previously believed to be the oldest in the galaxy vanished from the top of the records. A new entry appeared. Origin civilization, humanity. Estimated age: 3,200,000 years. The room erupted into stunned disbelief. That's impossible. It contradicts everything. It changes everything. The voice continued. Your ancestors crossed this galaxy before its youngest empires discovered fire. They carried knowledge beyond imagination, then chose to surrender it. Images surrounded the stunned researchers. Titanic human vessels drifting between galaxies. Cities built inside stars. Machines folding space like fabric. Then, those same humans dismantling their own empire. Destroying archives. Scattering colonies. Returning to a single world. Beginning again. Not because they had failed. Because they had learned that civilizations growing dependent upon inherited perfection eventually stopped growing altogether. Humanity had chosen to forget, so that one day it could earn greatness instead of inheriting it. The final image appeared. Ancient fleets sleeping inside folded dimensions beyond space itself. Millions of ships. Untouched by time. Waiting. The voice spoke one final sentence. The assembly believes it has isolated you. The golden sphere pulsed. Across the solar system, hidden gateways awakened. Stars bent. Space unfolded. And in the darkness between worlds, the first fleet finally began its journey home. The invasion began beneath a sky filled with impossible numbers. From every major hyperspace corridor surrounding the solar system, enemy fleets emerged in flawless formation, blotting out the stars with an armada so vast that automated observatories could no longer calculate its limits. Battleships the size of continents drifted beside sleek hunter-killers and swarms of autonomous drones, their engines igniting in waves of crimson light that painted the darkness like an ocean of fire. Across Earth, billions looked upward through telescopes, orbital feeds, and city-sized holographic displays. Families gathered in silence. Soldiers tightened trembling hands around their weapons. Children clung to their parents as emergency sirens echoed from every continent. The galaxy had come to finish what the Assembly's vote had started. Aboard the Resolute, Captain Elena Ward stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by holographic tactical projections that updated faster than the eye could follow. Red icons flooded the display until the solar system appeared completely encircled. Enemy fleet count exceeds prediction models. Planetary shields charging. Civilian evacuation routes active. Every report carried the same conclusion. By every conventional measure, humanity should have lost. Then, without warning, every light aboard the ship flickered. Not from damage. From synchronization. A pulse rippled through the vacuum of space, silent yet unmistakable. The newly awakened gateways hidden throughout the solar system burst into existence, not as explosions, but as perfectly circular windows carved into reality itself. Beyond them stretched a sea of brilliant white stars that did not belong to this universe, or perhaps belonged to an older version of it. One by one, they arrived. Ancient human vessels. At first there were dozens. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Finally, millions. The first fleet emerged without sound, each ship impossibly elegant, its silver hull flowing like liquid metal beneath constellations of moving symbols. They carried no banners of conquest. No intimidating broadcasts. Only a single emblem glowing softly across every vessel, the ancient symbol of Earth. Shock spread across every battlefield. Enemy admirals stared in disbelief as their sensors failed to classify the newcomers. Weapon systems refused to lock on. Artificial intelligences returned the same impossible message. Technology level, unknown. The first enemy commander gave the order to fire. Thousands of plasma lances, antimatter torpedoes, and stellar railgun rounds surged forward, enough firepower to vaporize entire solar systems. None of them reached their target. The projectiles simply stopped. Suspended motionless in space, as though time itself had forgotten to move. A heartbeat later, they dissolved harmlessly into shimmering particles that drifted away like glowing snow. No counterattack followed. No triumphant cheers echoed across human channels. Instead, Captain Elena Ward stepped toward the communications console. "Open every frequency," she said. The signal spread across the battlefield, reaching every ship, every colony, every frightened civilian. Her voice was calm. Steady. "We did not awaken to destroy the galaxy. We awakened to protect our home." As if responding to those words, the first fleet moved. Not with violence. With precision. Gravity itself bent around the ancient vessels. Enemy formations found themselves gently pushed apart, their firing solutions collapsing as invisible forces carried them safely away from Earth's orbital space. Artificial stars bloomed in the darkness, flooding battlefields with harmless light that disabled sensors without harming crews. Boarding parties discovered their weapons no longer functioned. Engines shut down peacefully. Entire armadas drifted powerless, but completely intact. Escape corridors appeared. Medical drones crossed battle lines without escorts. Rescue ships evacuated wounded soldiers regardless of the flag painted on their hulls. Across thousands of command bridges, enemy officers watched in stunned silence. Humanity possessed the power to erase them from existence. Instead, it chose mercy. Inside the Galaxy Assembly, emergency broadcasts poured into the chamber. Delegates who had once voted to abandon Terra watched live footage of ancient human ships repairing damaged alien cruisers, rescuing stranded enemy crews, and escorting terrified civilians away from combat zones. One delegate whispered the words no one wanted to admit. "We feared monsters." Another finished the sentence. "And condemned the only guardians we ever had." Above Earth, the first fleet settled into silent orbit beside the Resolute, not as conquerors returning to reclaim an empire, but as protectors standing watch over the descendants who had earned their inheritance through courage rather than birthright. In that breathtaking moment, every civilization in the galaxy realized the truth. Humanity's greatest strength had never been its forgotten technology. It had always been the choice. To hold overwhelming power. And still choose compassion. 3 weeks after the battle above Earth, the Grand Convocation Chamber stood exactly as it had on the day Terra was condemned. The same crystal walls shimmered with the memories of countless civilizations. The same rings of suspended light circled the vast hall like frozen halos. The same seats stretched outward in endless tiers beneath the captured neutron star that powered the assembly itself. Yet everything felt different. There were no heated debates. No whispered negotiations. No triumphant politicians exchanging confident glances. The chamber was filled instead with a silence born from humility, a silence that only comes after history has judged the living. One by one, delegates entered without ceremony. Species that had once refused to meet humanity's eyes now walked with lowered heads. Military commanders who had confidently predicted Earth's collapse carried the weight of millions of unnecessary deaths. Even the oldest empires, civilizations that had stood for tens of thousands of years, seemed strangely small beneath the enormous dome. At the center of the chamber, the holographic projector awakened. A single blue world appeared. Earth. Its oceans shimmered beneath swirling white clouds, brighter than anyone remembered. The faded gray image displayed during the infamous vote was gone. This time, the planet glowed with quiet life, surrounded by dozens of peaceful fleets, not occupying forces, but guardians standing watch in respectful silence. Then something unprecedented happened. Without instruction. Without protocol. Every delegate rose to their feet. No applause echoed through the chamber. Respect required no sound. Ambassador Elias Rowan stood once again at the human delegation platform, wearing the same uniform he had worn during the vote that had isolated Terra. He remembered the loneliness of that day. The thousands of faces that had looked away. The feeling that humanity had been abandoned by an entire galaxy. Now every eye remained fixed upon him. Not with fear. With gratitude. The Assembly's Chancellor slowly approached the central podium. Age seemed heavier upon the ancient leader than it had only weeks earlier. His voice, once filled with unquestioned authority, carried quiet regret. We assembled here believing we possessed wisdom earned through age. He paused, looking toward Earth's image. We believed humanity was reckless because it was young. His hands trembled slightly. In truth, we confused caution with wisdom, and kindness with weakness. A single gesture erased Galactic Resolution 9 from the Assembly's living archives. The decree dissolved into particles of light. In its place appeared a new inscription, carved into the chamber's crystalline walls by autonomous recorders that documented every defining moment in galactic history. Never mistake kindness for weakness. The words radiated across the chamber, reflected endlessly through the living crystal until they surrounded every delegate like a permanent reminder. Far above the assembly, hidden once again within forgotten observation galleries, the ancient watchers looked on in silence. One of them smiled for the first time in centuries. They remembered, the eldest whispered. No, another answered gently. They learned. Across the galaxy, reconstruction had already begun. Human engineers worked beside former enemies, rebuilding orbital stations that human weapons had deliberately spared. Ancient vessels of the First Fleet shared knowledge carefully, not enough to create dependence, only enough to help civilizations stand on their own. Trade routes reopened. Refugees returned home. Children who had spent weeks hiding beneath planetary shelters now played beneath open skies again, laughing without understanding how close the stars had come to becoming their graves. Aboard the Resolute, Captain Elena Ward stood alone on the observation deck one final time. Before her stretched an endless ocean of stars. Some were familiar. Most were not. Beyond the edge of every explored map lay mysteries untouched by any civilization, waiting patiently in the darkness. Behind her, the First Fleet remained in silent orbit, not as rulers reclaiming an ancient empire, but as guardians prepared to disappear once more if humanity no longer needed them. Elena smiled faintly. The greatest inheritance her species had received was never unimaginable technology. It was a lesson. Power could inspire fear. Victory could breed arrogance. But compassion. Compassion was what transformed survival into civilization. As the Resolute turned toward the unknown, its engines illuminated the darkness with brilliant blue light. One by one, human ships followed, disappearing into unexplored space, not in search of conquest, but of discovery. And from that day forward, every child born beneath every star learned the story of the vote that had changed the galaxy forever. Not because humanity had defeated an empire. Not because it had awakened an ancient fleet. But because, when abandoned, betrayed, and given every reason to answer hatred with destruction. Terra chose hope. And in choosing hope, humanity did something no weapon, no empire, and no ancient power had ever accomplished. It made an entire galaxy believe in a better future.